Welcome, everyone, to the second episode in our four-part series called The Giving 101. I'm Father Derek Larson, the Assistant Rector here at Good Shepherd Episcopal Church. And in this series, we're just exploring some of the basic questions about the spiritual practice of giving, some of the practical things, some of the biblical and theological things. So last week, we had a great introduction with Father Doug and Teresa Grassoff. And this week, we're talking about the theology of giving. And I'm really excited to have on the podcast a friend, a mentor, and a professor of mine, Dr. Stephen Tomlinson, who is the Associate Professor of Leadership and Administration at the Seminary of the Southwest, where I just graduated in May. And Stephen and I have had a lot of conversations about money and about giving. I've taken a number of classes with him, and he was an academic advisor of mine, and it is just a joy to get to be with Dr. Stephen Tomlinson. So why don't we just jump in? We're just going to talk about theology. But before we do that, Stephen, I was reflecting every time we talk about money and giving and generosity, especially in the context of faith, you always seem to be excited. You get really excited about that. And I think that's contagious. So I just want to ask, why the excitement for you? Why is this something you're interested in?
Because it is a great way for people to be connected. It's a great way for us to love each other. And it is a very creative thing, a very holy thing. It is our moment-to-moment creation of an economy where we get to be with other people, taking care of each other, discovering each other. And to me, it's a very creative, improvisational, and holy way to be with others.
Yeah, and that rings true to my experience as we talk about giving, and as money has not always been something that's easy on my mind, but we've really you've really helped open up the topic to me, and it is something to be excited about. And so I'm glad that we're doing this series. As we talk about the theology of giving, or the theology of money, I was trying to think about what is sort of a central assumption or foundation of our work. And it seems to me in a lot of our conversations at seminary, it was about this theme of abundance, or abundance versus scarcity. Last week, we talked a little bit about our generosity statement, and we've got these great bookmarks that we received a week or two ago. And right there in the middle, it says that we commit ourselves to trust in God's abundant provision. Could you share a little bit about how you think the themes of abundance and scarcity plays into the theology of giving?
Yes, I believe that we are naturally generous. We're naturally generous because our greatest desire is to be with God and to be with one another in a way that is holy and enjoyable. We're made to enjoy each other. And so one of the ways that we enjoy each other is by meeting each other's needs, by giving each other gifts, and by caring for one another in ways that are material. And we are going to do that probably because we can't help it, because it's fun, because that's how we're wired, when we are in a brain state of trust, when we are calm, when we're thoughtful, when we are unafraid. When we start to get scared, then we begin to be focused on survival. And when we're focused on survival, we're just going to hold on to whatever we've got more tightly out of fear that we don't have enough. And even though that is a narrow, lonely place to be, it is hard for us to stay out of it when we're afraid there's not enough. And that story can get stuck in our heads. And so I think that one of the things that comes from a practice of giving, whether it's giving alms, whether it is supporting your church, or whether it's just paying attention to the needs of people around you, or their special inclination to enjoy things and to give gifts, or to give care, is that those little practices remind us that we have enough. And those little practices are also occasions for us to give other things, to give love in other forms, like to give attention, to give compassion, to give our presence. And so money sometimes is sort of like the physical dance step that goes with a spiritual connection. And I think that when we remember that because of God's abundance, there is enough, and there's always enough for us to give something, even if it's just our attention, even if it's just our compassion, But when we start doing that, we remember that we are provided for. There is plenty. And then our hands tend to open wider and we find ourselves giving more.
Yeah. And that seems kind of countercultural in our society.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very countercultural. I mean, I think that the economic system that we live in wants us working really hard and wants us working all the time.
Right.
And no one's going to do that if they're not a little bit scared. So leaving us in a state of you're not going to have enough and you better stockpile. This reminds me of the parable of the rich fool, who's really the only thing he knew to do with his abundance was tear down his barns and store all that stuff away. And Jesus says, and God says to this man, you've lost your soul. Your life is death, or it's over, because that thing that we're given to enjoy each other with, all you know to do with it in your fear is, stored away.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a powerful passage of scripture too. And I think it's one that really speaks to our society today as well, a society that loves to work hard. And working hard is, of course, something great, but where does it come from? Like you're saying, does it come from a point of fear and an assumption of scarcity, or does it come out of generosity with a trust in God's abundance? I think that's really powerful.
I think also that if you think about the feeding on the hillside, Jesus has 5,000 people and 5 loaves and 2 fish, that whether you imagine that there was some food there already that people were hoarding that they chose to share, or whether you believe that all the food came from somewhere else, it still took some coordination to pass all this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And a few minutes before that miracle happened, all these people were looking at each other like, I'm in a mob of folks, and I'm not sure I'm going to have enough, and I better take care of myself. And Jesus says in some versions of the story, tell them to sit down in small groups. Tell them to sit down in groups where they can really see each other. And I think that whatever form the actual miracle took, that people's presence with one another, their de-escalation of the fear of strangers and all the scarcity mentality that goes with that, was present in how he created that community of love and sharing out of what was moments before a crowd of anxiety.
A crowd of anxiety. Yeah. So in this generosity statement that we have an invitation to our congregation, which says that we're invited to examine our relationship with God as it relates to our possessions. And as I was reflecting on that invitation, I'm always reminded of this question that I've heard you ask a number of times. If God, or if money were your God, how would you know it? And you've shared that in a number of different conversations. Could you share a little bit about that, in particular as a practice of examination as we reflect on our own lives, and assumptions about who God is and what role money has in our life?
The question actually came from students in a seminary class. We were studying passages, where Jesus talks about mammon. And, the most famous one, you cannot serve God and mammon. So mammon is presented as a rival deity, as if it were a god, as if it had the power to command our affection, our devotion, that we would worship it. And one of the students in the class asked, well, if money were my God, how would I know? And we all suddenly decided that was the question we were there to think about. And so people began to reflect, what is a God? What is a God? A God is what we turn to when we are afraid. It's who we pray to when we are anxious and seeking to make sure we're going to be okay. A God is something that we praise. It's something that we believe is powerful and will solve our problems. And a lot of the students began to have this uncomfortable discovery, as I was having, that a lot of times money is my God.
Right.
It is functioning in that role. It is my attention, my affection, my devotion is to things that are about getting, having, saving, spending, maybe giving, money, but it's actually that spirit of calculation and acquisition and the trust that if I've got problems or something I want, that this is the way I'm going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a question worth asking. Maybe a way to reflect on it for us is how much of the delight or joy in our life comes from stuff we buy.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not genuine joy, how much of our effort and attention at providing satisfaction or relief or managing our anxiety is tied up in getting and spending? How many of our aspirations are about having stuff or about having enough money? And I think uncomfortably often, my friends are in the position that we would have to honestly answer, yeah, I think about money all the time. And I think about it sometimes in a way that's aspirational or maybe even greedy. And other times I think about it in a way that is fearful and scarcity and anxiety. But still, my thoughts are about money, and the solution is more money. Mm. Whereas when I'm with Jesus, then one of the things I'm reminded of is that the deepest satisfaction, the thing that I really want more of, not only isn't bought with money, but it doesn't even have the same logic as money. It's not the kind of thing that you can pile up in that way. It's more like the manna that falls in the desert. It's more like a conversation with someone you love. And so being aware of what does it feel like when you're getting satisfaction from money, which is what money's for. Money's there to connect us with people, to buy stuff with. And there is a satisfaction of need that occurs through that we should be aware of. And it's, a natural body function of being human. And it's a connection with the wider world. When our spiritual thoughts, when there is anxiety that has nothing to do with, are we going to survive, but anxiety about, am I going to keep up? Am I going to maintain my status? Am I going to stay ahead of boredom? Those are spiritual questions. And if we're letting money answer those for us, then money is playing a bigger role than just a body function or plumbing. It's playing a spiritual role, and one that we should be suspicious of, because there's something better to answer those questions with.
Right. I think that's really important, because we often assume that money is not spiritual, while in fact that our spiritual lives are often driven by the way that we use our possessions and money. And so an invitation to look at our relationship with our possessions and money is an invitation of looking at our relationship with God. Yeah, that's really powerful. Well, I really wish that everyone here at Good Shepherd could just take a whole class with you on this topic, because it would be fun. And it's exciting to think creatively about generosity and giving. So I really appreciate your time talking with us today, Stephen. And I hope that we get an opportunity to do that again. Thank you so much.
The pleasure's mine, and I look forward to my next chance to be with your folks.
Excellent. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We really are glad that you're participating in this series. Next week, we're going to be talking about some of the practical aspects of giving, some of the nuts and bolts. So we look forward to talking again, and we'll see you then.